History isn't just a collection of dates and names. It's a series of choices, moments where a single decision can send ripples across centuries, fundamentally changing the course of a nation. Today, we're diving into three such pivotal moments in American history, choices that pushed the United States down paths of unavoidable and often painful transformation. These aren't just stories from a textbook. They are the dramatic turning points that shaped the very fabric of America. Our first story takes us back to the summer of 1787, to a stuffy room in Philadelphia. The newly independent states were struggling under a weak government, the Articles of Confederation. The nation was on the verge of collapse. Delegates from across the country gathered for what they called the Constitutional Convention. Tasked with a monumental choice, should they simply amend the failing articles, or should they tear them up and start fresh? Many, like Patrick Henry, feared a strong central government. They saw it as a new form of the very monarchy they had just fought to escape. The debate was fierce, the arguments passionate. The smaller states worried about being swallowed by the larger ones. For weeks it seemed like the convention would fail, that the American experiment would end before it truly began. Then came the Great Compromise. Roger Sherman and Oliver Ellsworth of Connecticut proposed a radical idea: a two-house legislature. In one house, the House of Representatives, representation would be based on population, pleasing the large states like Virginia. In the other, the Senate, every state would have 2 senators, regardless of size, protecting the smaller states like Delaware. This wasn't a perfect solution. In fact, it was a messy, pragmatic bargain born of desperation. But the choice to accept it was transformative. By opting for a completely new, stronger federal system, instead of a weak alliance of states, the delegates set America on a path toward becoming a unified nation-state. This decision created the framework for a powerful central government capable of managing a continental economy, a national defense, and a unified legal system. It was the moment the United States went from being a plural known a collection of independent entities to a singular one. This single choice in a hot Philadelphia summer ensured America's survival and laid the groundwork for its eventual rise as a global power. A choice whose consequences we live with every single day. Now, let's fast forward 70 years to a nation deeply, tragically divided. The year is 1860, and the issue of slavery is tearing the country apart. The political landscape was a minefield. The Democratic Party had fractured over the issue, and a new party, the Republicans, had emerged. Built on the platform of stopping the expansion of slavery into new territories, their candidate was a lawyer from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln. His election was the spark that lit the powder keg. Southern states saw his victory as a direct threat to their way of life and their economic system, which was built on the backs of enslaved people. South Carolina seceded from the Union, and others quickly followed. This presented Lincoln with the most agonizing choice any American president has ever faced. Should he let the southern states go in peace? Many in the North argued for it. Let them form their own confederacy, they said. Avoid a bloody, costly war. It was the path of least resistance. Or should he use force to preserve the Union, to uphold the Constitution, and to prove that a democratic republic could not be dismantled by a dissenting minority? Lincoln chose the harder path. In his inaugural address, he appealed to the better angels of our nature, but he also made it clear he would not, and could not, accept secession. When Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter in April 1861, Lincoln's choice was sealed. He called for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion. This decision plunged the nation into its deadliest conflict, the Civil War. The transformation it unleashed was brutal and absolute. The war cost over 600,000 lives and left the South in ruins. But it also led to the abolition of slavery through the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment, fundamentally redefining the meaning of freedom in America. Lincoln's choice to fight for the Union was not just about preserving a political entity. It was a choice that forced a moral reckoning. It ensured that the nation, in his own immortal words, would have a new birth of freedom, and that the promise of liberty, however imperfectly, would be extended to millions who had been denied it. The America that emerged from the Civil War was a profoundly different country than the one that entered it, all stemming from one man's solemn choice to preserve the Union at any cost. Our final story takes us into the 20th century, to the depths of the Great Depression. By 1932, the American dream had become a nightmare. A quarter of the workforce was unemployed. Banks were failing, families were losing their homes and farms. The spirit of the nation was broken, and many feared that capitalism itself had failed. The country was at a crossroads, with calls for radical, even revolutionary change growing louder. Into this crisis stepped Franklin Delano Roosevelt. When he accepted the Democratic nomination, he promised a new deal for the American people. This wasn't just a campaign slogan. It was a promise of a fundamental shift in the relationship between the government and its citizens. The choice confronting FDR and the nation was this: should the government stick to its traditional hands-off approach to the economy, hoping for the market to correct itself? Or should it intervene directly and massively in the lives of its people to provide relief, recovery, and reform? Hoover, his predecessor, had favored the first path. FDR chose the second, and he did so with breathtaking speed and scale. In his first 100 days, he pushed through a wave of legislation that was unlike anything America had ever seen. The government created jobs programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps, which put young men to work in national parks. It established the Tennessee Valley Authority to bring electricity and development to one of the nation's poorest regions. It created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the FDIC, to ensure bank deposits and restore faith in the financial system. This collection of programs, the New Deal, was a monumental transformation. It established the idea that the federal government has a direct responsibility for the economic well-being of its citizens. It created a social safety net, Social Security, unemployment insurance, that had never existed before. This choice was incredibly controversial. Critics accused Roosevelt of socialism, of turning America into a dependency state. But for millions of struggling Americans, it was a lifeline. The New Deal didn't end the Great Depression. World War II would ultimately do that, but it did restore hope. It fundamentally and permanently expanded the role of the federal government in American life. The debates we have today about the size of government, social welfare programs, and economic regulation all have their roots in the critical choice made during the 1930s to embrace the New Deal. From a stuffy room in Philadelphia, to the solemn steps of the Capitol on the eve of war, to a nation desperate for hope during the Great Depression, these three choices fundamentally altered the American trajectory. They weren't easy and they weren't without cost, but they forced the nation to transform, to confront its contradictions, and to redefine its own meaning. They show us that history is not inevitable. It is made one difficult choice at a time. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey through history as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that made us who we are. See you next time.